Hey, I'm Kevin Tetz. Thanks for watching AMD Garage. With these videos that we're doing, we hope to give you a little bit of information and some inspiration and hopefully make your restoration project go a little bit easier. With this video, we're going to be dealing with a problem that's pretty common in our industry, and that's rusty floors. And although we've got a second generation Camaro behind me, a lot of what we're showing will apply to almost any platform. So let's take a look at what we got. Obviously, the car has been media blasted, and we can see what's good metal. More importantly, we can see what is not good metal. We've got floors that need to be replaced, but we've got sections that we can replace, or the option of a complete floor assembly from autometaldirect.com. We know what the inside looks like. Let's take a look at the bottom. We can stop. Here, obviously, we can see the ravages of time and moisture on the floor pans. But what we can also see are that these braces are in excellent condition. There's no lying when you media blast down to white metal. So this tells me that the foundation of the structure of this vehicle is in perfect shape and it's ready to be worked on top of. And we don't need the full floor. It's nice to know we have that option, but we're not going to need it with this car. Matter of fact, we did a partial pan right here with an AMD replacement and worked it into the existing metal. Back here, we've got a new trunk pan, drop-offs, outer wheelhouses, taillight panel, and quarter panels, as well as a roof skin that you can't see right now. So you Camaro guys, check out autometaldirect.com. In the catalog, we've got lots of options for you. So let's take a look now at what we're going to be working with on this project. This is the panel we'll be working with today, and it goes from the toe board to the rear seat pan, from the inner rocker all the way to the transmission tunnel. And you can see that it doesn't have the braces like the full floor assembly does, but we don't need them. Ours are in good shape. It's an accurate stamping, and it's going to give us all the material that we need to go from stem to stern on this. Now, I will say that the toe board, this part right here, is bad on this vehicle. Part of the firewall assembly. So our floor stops here, toe board picks up. So what we're going to have to do is make a panel, and that's fine. We can fabricate some stuff because our panel goes to right about there. And I've got a little bit of tin worm there. We'll walk you through the process of making a panel that'll fit into here so you don't have to buy the whole firewall assembly. So you don't have to buy the full firewall. AMD sells flat stock, 20 gauge, different sizes, and obviously I've used the heck out of this. It's really nice to have some flat stock that you can manipulate or use for little corners and patches that you don't maybe have in a full replacement panel, or just a little piece or a patch here and there that you know you're going to need along the way. Now, let's talk about tools and equipment. We're moving metal around, so a hammer and a dolly is a really good piece of equipment to have on hand, as well as grinding. These belt sanders are really nice to get into tight areas, and a good cutoff wheel with the guard. I'm using flap wheels and 4.5-inch cutoff wheels to get rid of the old metal, as well as some marking devices. We want to make sure and mark our cut lines, things like this. Let's talk about PPE. You want to make sure that your respiratory system is protected, as well as your hands, eyes, and ears for hearing protection. Make sure that you're working safe so you can have a little bit of fun with it. You don't have to stress out about getting hurt. We are welding. Obviously, we've got to weld our floors back into the vehicle assembly. If you don't have a welder, make friends with a buddy that does. Maybe he'll teach you how to weld. If you do, make sure you're wearing the appropriate PPE for welding, and always do some tests on some scrap stock before you start on your project, and we'll walk you through that process as well. As far as a difficulty level, because of the welding involved, we're going to give this a 3.5 out of 5. It's not that difficult, but you've got to be able to master welding skills because, let's face it, we want it welded in properly. We're going to show you some things that are a little bit questionable that people have done on this vehicle, and you don't want to be that guy. So 3.5 out of 5 on the difficulty meter, and you can count on probably 2 to 4 hours per corner if you want to do your floor pans individually. All right. I always like to take a marker and just mark out my trim lines. It just gives me a guide. I'm cutting around the torque box here, and this is good solid metal, so I'll leave a little bit of that intact. Right here, we can see pinholes. So I want a section where there's still good metal. Welding with metal, even though all the rust has gone from the media blast process, welding metal that's degraded to the point where it's got pinholes in it is really difficult. You have a tendency to blow through. So you want to avoid that. Get down to the good metal. All of this is super solid, keeping that. And I'll just obviously come here. We're going to have to be a little bit careful around these braces, but we're not getting rid of the braces. Up along here, I'm going to leave myself about an inch. And if I need to whittle that down, I can, but it gives me the option to work against it because we're going to be doing lap welds on this floor pan installation. Again, down here, even though this middle section, I could patch that on a small way, we're going to utilize the strength of the large panel that we've got and put it all in together. Transmission tunnel, it's in good shape. We're going to cut there. And here, again, there's a pinhole. So there's my stop sign. I'm going to use the metal from here and here. For now, I'm just going to cut here. My pan comes up into the toe board a little bit, but we can whittle that as we go. Torque box here. We'll cut here. And again, right here, I'm going to leave myself about an inch. It's kind of a shelf to install my new assembly on, my new floor on. So that gives me a roadmap. So I don't have to cut blind, I don't have to guess at anything, and I'll pull that loose, I'll cut that loose. We'll have to drill some spot welds to expose the insides of these braces, and then we'll figure it out. There's a lot of trimming to do. Just get used to that. And you've got to peel some metal back, and you've got to take a good look and adjust as you're formulating your master plan of putting this entire floor in. Here's the other opportunity that you have. You're going to see the inside of these braces, and you're going to see what a great opportunity it is to do a little bit more rust treatment on the insides of those, clean them out. And then when we cover them up, because you're never going to have access to them again, when we cover them up, we'll be secure that we've done all we can to make this car last another 60 years. All right, let's get started. PPE up. All right, so I'm using the 4.5-inch cutoff wheel, and we're just going to cut around some of the perimeter marks. Now, obviously, elephant in the room, we've got this wonderful rotisserie to where we can get to the bottom side of the panels. This can be done from the top, of course. I would just suggest that maybe you put the vehicle up on jack stands and do some slices on either side of your support braces. That way that you know where they are exactly from the top, or even a drill bit, something like that, just to locate your cross braces, because you want to keep them intact if you're doing what we're doing here. So I'm going to mask up, and we've got some cutting to do. Not too much technical information to pass on for something like this. If you're using a thin blade on a 4.5-inch wheel, just be mindful that you don't twist the blade while it's spinning. And also, don't force the blade into the metal too much. You can prematurely wear your blade out, and if you're too rammy with it, there's a possibility that you can break a blade, and that's not something that you want. All right, let's look from the inside again. Basically, there's a big dang hole, but this talks to us a little bit as well. Here's where our braces are, front, rear, and this right here. Here's the torque box. We are going to get rid of this metal because we've got some pinholes in there, and it's good solid white metal right up into here, which is exactly what we did on the other side. And yeah, we'll just figure out a way to have a nice overlap on that. So what we've got to do now is remove these upper panels from the cross braces without ruining the integrity of the cross braces or damaging them. There's a couple of different things that I want to show you when it comes to that as well. All right, so this is not metal prep, this is exposure. What I'm doing is showing myself where the spot welds are. And when I run some sandpaper over top of it, you can see the depression right there. You see them? Bam, there's one. Just to make crystal clear, I'm going to mark them with my ink marker. There's another one right there. I can see it. I can see that dimple right there. Sometimes they'll just show themselves to you. Sometimes the sandpaper trick sometimes that sandpaper trick really helps. You see that? Bam, there it is. And we're right beside the brace, so we know that these are all spot welded along the braces. Careful with that rough cut there too. All right, so we've got spot weld. That's a depression. That might be a spot weld. I know that's a spot weld. That's a spot weld. That's a spot weld. That's a spot weld. That's probably one. That's probably one. And that's definitely one. All right, so you get my point. We've got some work to do. I've got to show myself where these spot welds are. Then we can go about the task of taking that top panel off. There's a couple different things I want to show you. I want to show you a formal spot weld cutter, as well as a different way to do it with a belt sander that it's just a different school of thought, but it's kind of fun. All right, so I'm just going to join my cut lines together here and here. And I'm going to very carefully cut through, so hopefully I'll only cut through this top panel and not into the brace, but I'm going to do that here and here as well as on these sides, and then we'll dig into those spot welds because I believe I've got them all located. So I've got my drill and my spot weld cutter. The way I like to do this is to put a little dimple in the very center of the spot weld, and then I'll come back and remove the metal around, and that way the spot weld bit doesn't walk, which can be really annoying. Doesn't take much, just a little nub so it can locate. That one went through, didn't it? I'm wondering if I'm on the inside of that brace. Just noticed that was a little bit dark right there. Okay, so. All right. You want to be aware with this guy so you don't go too far. You can see the blades on the end. As they turn around, they do a nice job of cutting metal, but you don't want to go full speed with them. You want to be nice and slow. All we're trying to do is go through the top layer. Sometimes you can tell, see right there, you can see it perfectly. I've gone through the top layer, getting ready to attack the bottom layer, so that's the stop sign right there. All right. That's not a spot weld. I think this might be, though. It's hard to tell sometimes. What I'm feeling underneath is to see if I've got a double panel. All right, so that tells me, see how it's folded right there? That's a point of contact right there. I was right about that one. So here's the spot weld. I believe we're through there. All right, so we're just going to work our way up this panel. All right, so I've got my panel separator knife and a hammer. So what I'm doing here is, since I've got probably 90% of the spot welds located, what I'm doing is just tapping. You can see the separator knife. Well, we don't even really need it. But what it does is it, just in case you miss a part of a spot weld, the separator knife, like, look at that one. See, there's one I missed right there. But it's a hardened steel, and sometimes you can actually break the metal. There, we can get the rest of that with a grinder. See, this is the way I was taught to do it, but it's not the only way to do it. There. What I like about it is that it's fairly non-destructive to the bottom panel. And I'm here to tell you, when you find a cross brace like this, that you can still see the factory dip primer on there and everything is loose and it's not corroded up, we've gotten lucky with this. And these are just as nice on the inside as they are on the outside. That said, we're going to treat them with a zinc weld-through primer, but this is just nice for me to know, because this is my car, that this is really, really solid. So that's one way to get rid of a spot welded panel. We're going to do a different method here, and this is something that I've learned actually with a bunch of other custom shops, guys that I know, technicians that I know, and just debate that we've had. But I'm going to do a different method of exposing these spot welds on this brace. So this is my belt sander. This is an electric one, which I've kind of fallen in love with this tool. What we're going to do is just ride on all the spot welds and grind most of the way through them. About that much. See, if you look right in there, you see where the steel is blued at the bottom? Can you see that? That's an indicator that it's super, super thin, and that's about as far as you want to go. See, there's another one right there. That one came loose very nicely. We've got another guy right there, so we're going to get Mr. Belt Sander. I think I missed one there, too. We'll find out. There's another one right there, but I think I can get around it. No, this is too easy. When you take a look, no matter which way I did it, they both require a little bit of cleanup. This is just a 3/8 inch joint there. This is, well, there's a little bit of panel flange right there. Either way is effective. It just depends on the type of tools that you have or how you want to approach things. Either way, it gets the job done. So now what I'm going to do is clean up with my flap wheel, get everything flush and everything ground down to the level of that brace. All right, we've got one more piece to cut out, and then we'll be ready for another test fit. All right, so that guy's gone. Again, we get a glimpse into the inside of the inner structure. And we've got two little spot welds right there to clean up. Then, ooh, that's sharp. Then we'll treat the rust that's here, it's just surface rust, and then we'll be ready for a test fit. All right, so we're going to test fit this panel again. We're getting closer, but a couple of things show themselves to us, right? This flange right here, this is designed to be welded right to the inner rocker panel, which is this panel right here. So here's the flange that I was just touching. Obviously, if we completely disassemble the car, we can get access to that. We don't necessarily want to do that. So what we're going to do on our floor is to trim this entire 90-degree flange completely off of it. So we just have a flat surface here that is then going to sit on top of this flat surface here and be a nice, super strong weld. The other thing is this. We've got all of this good metal down here, and it's welded from the factory to the torque box and the end of the frame rail there. We've got lots of real estate here to mess with, but what we're going to do is section this down here a little bit farther down, use as much of the original sheet metal as possible. When the original sheet metal has integrity, like the blasted white metal, we want to use as much of it as possible, and then let our AMD patches take over. So that's the philosophy there. There's a lot more work to do. Did you think you were going to get by without doing work? It's called body work. So we got some more cutting and grinding, and we're getting closer. Now I'm going to start refining the panel. There's a couple of things I'm going to trim. Is this 90-degree flange right here all the way along, so I have a flat panel, because I don't need that. We're going to leave the one that came with the car on the car. The other thing I'm going to trim down is this little lip right here. Take a close look at that. That's just part of the stamping process. Since this is not a complete floor, it's a little flange on the bottom side of it, right there. And it just needs to be flush so this panel can sit flat up against the transmission tunnel. And we're going to go from there. We'll cut off what we need to cut off and refine what we need to refine. And I'm going to leave most of this panel intact because there's strength in a larger panel, and it's just a good idea. Okay. A couple of things to point out here while I'm trimming this long 90-degree flange off of the floor section. In the first place, I'm letting the blade fall naturally into the pocket of the 90-degree cut. Then I'm gliding it along several different times instead of bearing into the cut. What this does is form a pathway for my blade to follow, as well as trims down a little bit of thickness on the metal so that when I finally direct the blade in to do my final cut, it's kind of got a guideline. There's a pathway that it wants to follow, and it just makes cutting easier and is less hard on your consumables. You're just going to wear out less of the cutting wheels. Flap wheel on a rotary tool is my first choice for grinding metal. The overlap sections keep the metal cooler than a traditional grinding rock, and they last a long time, since the grit is constantly being re-exposed as the wheel wears down. This one is 40 grit. All right, I'm going to do one more cut, and that's to cut this top flange off. I'm probably going to section actually down here a little bit farther, but I want this lip gone so I have a good slip down into the recess of the factory floor. So I'm just going to do one of these. Just come straight across there, and ish. Should have been straighter. Anyway, we are going to do some more cutting. You'll notice me using mostly electric tools for metal fab. The torque of an electric tool is higher than air-powered tools and more consistent, and they don't bog down under load. I can be very precise with a 4.5-inch cutting wheel with an easy touch, and then I can follow that with a flap wheel to trim the sharp edges down on the cut metal. Notice the PPE as well. Now this should get us a lot closer for a fit. And it does. All right, so let's take a look at this. Up at the toe board, we can see our bead rolls, rolled edges, fall almost perfectly in line with the factory one. So that tells me that we're in the right place. Now along here, you can see that this is a nice natural seat. Still a little proud, a little up high, but that's fine. Along here, the pocket is sitting where it needs to. We've got a little swage line there that lines up with that one. So we're not perfectly in alignment, but we're really, really close. So it needs to go forward just a little bit. We've got 2 more swage lines here that these ribs line up with. And that's just the overlap panel between the firewall and the transmission tunnel. And that's perfectly natural. That's going to look really good. And it's going to look great completely under the carpet. Nobody can see it. So I'm going to leave all of this panel intact here. And I just have to patch. You can see that's 4 fingers. So that's about 4 inches of patch that I have to put up at the top. That's not bad. So what I'm going to do, since I know I need to Okay, so just moving it a little bit farther ahead, we can see that this now lines up almost perfectly. So that tells me that that's really close. And this is going to be flush, so I'm going to trim, well, I might trim about, what is that? That's about 1/4 inch off there. I might trim that down a little bit more. We've still got somewhere in around there. Yeah, probably right about there is the threaded boss for our seat belt. I don't want to remove the factory one for a couple of different reasons. But I also want to put good solid metal in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lock this down with some Tech screws and look at the bottom side and see how flush everything is, see if we're sitting down on the braces, see if the braces need adjusting, and then we'll move forward. Sound good? Sound good. Here's some things that I really like to use when I'm fitting panels and testing them. We've got Tech screws. These are Phillips headed screws with a self-drilling end. Super handy. And they're good for a couple of uses. You can go to any home store, home center, hardware store, or buy them online. They're just a really nice thing to have to lock things in place while you're test fitting. Magnetic bit on my drill from a man named Cherokee that I appreciate very much. Helps me get this stuff locked into place. Now what I'm doing is putting pressure down and forward on it, and I'm going to lock it in. Oh, let's go right here. And that's a fail because I'm into a brace somewhere. So we're going to back that off. I'm going to go to a different spot. That's a little better. All right. That's pretty flush. I'm going to just check with that. And right here, because it's bouncy, I might pull some more of that flange off of there just to make it sit flatter. All right, there. I'm going to do one more up in here. Now, we'll take a look at the bottom side and see what matches, see what doesn't. So a couple of things to note right here. These grooves, these indentations seat perfectly with this floor. Right here, we can do a little bit better with that. I'll cut a little bit more out of the OE. Well, my screw aim was a little off, let's just say. But I'm going to trim a little bit more of the factory floor off. We're lining up pretty dang good here. This is just a first fit. And we've got to be a little more flush in the front. That's fine. I've got some interior panels to trim off. Anytime you're stacking metal, it raises the fitment of it exponentially. So we have to trim all of that stuff off, which I have not done yet. Right here, this is good. Right here, this is good. But we're seeing a little bit of discrepancy right there. I'll talk about this in a second. Right here, nice fit. Right here, there's a groove and there's a groove. And on the back side of this here, this falls in nicely because you can see that that's a raised portion and this is a raised portion, but it's not here. Here's why. When they made these second generation Camaros, there was a cutoff point, a revision in the design. This is a 1970 to 73 floor. This car is a 1974. So the 74 and up floor design was a little bit different. You're going to run into that sometimes with aftermarket panels. For us, it's not a huge deal. I can alter these braces and make it fit the floor, or I can alter the floor to make it fit the braces. For me, it's easier probably to revise the floor, but we'll figure that out as we go along. The bottom line is you're just going to run into some just subtle model year changes and differences along the way, and you just have to kind of adapt and ask the metal to move around with you. But overall, for an initial fit, I'm happy with that. We've got a gap here. Obviously, this pocket needs to come farther this way, and that'll happen as we trim and bring the two stamped pieces together. That, I'm just going to say it, this and this were made almost 60 years apart. You're going to have some subtle differences. All right, right here, one last point to belabor. This is my factory seatbelt receiver. It's welded in, it's DOT approved. I don't want to move this at all. For safety reasons, I want to keep this intact and in place. So I'm going to work around that seatbelt mount. But for now, I'm going to make a couple of marks and just make some mental notes for me to what I need to change. That goes there. That's where my line is. For the sake of it, I've got some other 18 gauge. I think what I may do is trim this. That's not much of that brace to get rid of. That way I keep the floor intact. Yep, There's my plan. More like there is where that angle starts. And that will allow all of this to sit down in here. You can see how cause and effect happens, right? This is lifting the pan up. You got to think in reverse. And it's holding it off of this brace right here. Right here and right here and, well, right there are right there are factory weld points. We want to weld back on those points. So this, to me, is the way to revise this. Sometimes I have to talk my way through things. Sometimes you just have to think your way through things and kind of improvise along the way. And that should get us going. It may seem like a lot more extra work making the supports match the floor instead of just hammering the floor to match the existing supports. But it'll look better from both sides, and it'll be as strong as what GM designed when this car was built. Test fitting, well, it's just part of the process, and the rotisserie makes it a lot easier to check the fits, but this can be done on jack stands as well. All right, so this gave some relief to that. Obviously, that's kind of flush with that, and look at the difference here. This is deeper in the pocket, and I can't put my finger underneath there anywhere, so that's helping. However, we've got another difference in the panel right here, so I'm going to do the same between here and here. Just notch that. Oh, here we go, yeah. That's where the difference is. You see that raised portion there? So I'm going to go from there up to there, and this will be removed, and we'll replace it with some 18 gauge that I've got sitting on the shelf. And that should get us down here. Right here, I'm going to do this. You can see the panels. You see that stack of sheet metal. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 layers or so there. I've got to trim the floors out of there to make that have a natural seat, and then this will fit better, although that's not too bad right now. All right, so we're working on it, piece at a time. All right, let's take a closer look. So I did the relief cut on my cross brace right here, and it's in the right place, but I've got to trim a little bit more up here because this is interfering, right? That said, it's a lot closer. That's getting within, I'm going to call it within, about 3/16, maybe 1/4 of an inch. But right here, I'm going to get rid of a little bit more of the factory material, because right here, see how tight that is? It's butting up against, and I want this pan and that edge to show a little bit more. And right about here, I'm going to keep this intact, like I said. Well, I like straight lines, so I'm just going to go here and meet up with that line, and that's going to be how much of the AMD panel stays and how much of the original panel stays. Right here, I'm pretty okay with that. It's a nice curve. You can see the seat. Once I trim that, that should help. Right here, it doesn't need to come down very much more. Look at right there. Our gap is closing in there. I can tap that down. It's a natural curve right there. And that's gonna resolve itself. Now right here, that is kind of a hard corner from the factory panel. And it's causing a bit of interference right there. This needs, I want to drop this down a little bit more. I could push that up into there, and it's going to make a nice natural crown. It's going to look great from the bottom and from the top. Around here, getting the actual floor panel out from behind there, that helped that a lot. And just with fingertip pressure, that's closer. But right around here, since I'm going to utilize the AMD panel here, I'm going to actually trace it from the inside, but it's probably going to come out about there. My point is this. You see me explaining and cutting and trimming and explaining and cutting and trimming. what I want you to wrap your head around is having a nice natural seat where you don't have to force things. You could ram a bunch of screws into this and have the mating surfaces flush and distort the panel and still have a mating surface flush to where it's good enough. But what I want you to always have as a goal is to have a nice natural seat to where you can put the panel in place, not under stress. That way, you're going to have way less tendency of squeaks and rattles down the road, of a nicer fit, and a nicer look you can take pride in when you finish this job up. So I've got some more trimming and fitting here in the spirit of what I've just been talking about. So we're going to go to work, and then we'll talk about how we're going to attach this. So what I'm doing is tracing, obviously, around where the new and old floor meet, because I'm very happy where things are, where the seat is, and what I mean by that is how the panel sits in. All the gaps are really close, and also while you weren't looking, I went ahead and made my little insert pieces here. Slight little jog in there. It's the same gauge steel, so I've marked them where I know they go. It matches up with the detail in the floor. And I've got one front and rear. So we'll burn those in and it'll match the floor and have a nice natural seat and be plenty strong, as well as keeping the integrity of the original panel. My marker is starting to fail me a little bit, but this is going to show me where everything is on the outside. And I'm coming dangerously close to trimming too much of the original car off right there, but we're still in pretty good shape. All right, so that's going to talk to me when I flip this thing upside down. So what we have now is a road map of where our supports are. So I know that they're about 3/4 of an inch. Obviously, this is a tracing of support, support. So I know now, well, let's do one right there. I know where I'm going to do my welds to have a nice overlap. This is our shelf that sits on the edge on the inside of the rocker. We utilize these holes too. And that's right at the front. And along here, we've got, this is actually a butt weld. Here we've got, I'm going to drill some holes so I can access. Actually, what I'm going to do is drill in the cut that out. And I want about a 3/4 inch flange. So that's where I traced from the bottom side. My overlap is going to just go around here. ish. But what's important is right here. And these are where we're going to drill holes in the panel and do our rosette welds or plug welds without drilling any of the structure out. And that's important to me because we want to keep the integrity of the structure. It's your call how you space these out, but I like things to look symmetrical. They just did them random on the assembly line. We can make it look nice. All right, and right here is our inner structure. Make sure that's glued in nicely. There, you can see where this line kind of meets up with that line, so we're going to continue this, and that's going to be, this obviously is a screw hole into the side of the existing floor. I'm going to have to measure that. I want to make sure, but I'm pretty sure that this is going to go right across there like that. So more cutting. We're going to cut along that line, which is going to help the pan settle deeper into the pocket, and we'll drill 1/4-inch holes on every single dot that I've dotted out here, and then we'll be ready to set it in place and burn it in for the final time. That's kind of exciting. So I just went ahead and hand formed some metal and replaced it right here in the toe board where it meets the AMD panel, got rid of all that rusty metal. Now we've got to clean out the inside of these braces and put a weld-through primer and a coating system on them to protect them from rust before we put in the panel, and then we're close. We can finally install our floors. Now I'm going to spray my rust converter. We've got a little bit of surface rust. This is just a phosphatizer rust converter. I'm going to work it into the surface a little bit. Make sure it stops any progression of that rust before we cover it up. I'll wipe off any excess with a solvent-borne cleaner, which will get us set up and ready for another rust preventative coating to seal in all this bare metal. doke. It looks good to me. Got any excess dust, dirt, or grime off the outside edge, and ready for some coatings. While that sets up and dries, I want to show you some tools that are going to help you get the job done. You've seen me using Tech screws. These are number 8 Phillips screws with a self-drilling end. There's a box of 260 of them, and they do a nice job of drilling through panels and giving a clamp force. The one thing about these is that the drill ends tend to wear out quickly, so it's kind of a one-time use thing. If you plan on doing more than one panel or plan on doing a lot of sheet metal replacement, I highly recommend that you invest in a set of Clecos. Clecos are an industry standard in aircraft maintenance and mechanics as well as automotive restoration. They act like a reusable pop rivet. Once you put the Cleco in the plier, you can insert the end into a 1/8 inch pilot hole. When you release the plier, you can see what happens. The end widens because the jaws go back on the pin, and it has a clamping force. It'll hold 2 panels together. You also have the option of a clamp. If you just need a pinch, you can see how convenient that is. Like I said, if you're planning on doing very much panel replacement at all, a set of Clecos will be a welcome addition to your toolbox. We're going to be doing plug welds or rosette welds with this panel installation. That either involves drilling a lot of holes into one side of the joint or punching the holes in. Now, if you're going to use drills, I recommend these Can-Cut drills. They have a stepped end that's fluted, and they stay cool, and they keep you from having to do a pilot hole if you're in larger diameters. These are a great set of drills, and again, will be a welcome addition to your toolbox. If you plan on doing a bunch of panel replacement, you might want to get one of these air tools. This is a flanger and a puncher. It works great. The flanger, when you pull the trigger, it creates a shelved edge there. So if you're wanting to create a flush fit with a bit of a relief, the flange tool works great. If you're doing rosettes or plug welds like we are, the punch end punches a perfect 3/8 hole and gives you the perfect opportunity to lay it against your other panel and do a perfect plug weld that way. Tools don't make the job, but they make the job easier. So now that we're ready for this, we have about 300 holes to drill in our panel before we can install it. Let's go. Now I've created alignment marks. You can see them right here. And there's some right here. So I'm just going to line those back up again. There we go. And I'm going to use my Clecos and lock it in. I know my welder because I use it a lot, but it's always a good idea to test a few times on some scrap metal. And I've trimmed enough material to make some test patches and dial in the settings, which is exactly what I do if I'm working on a different machine. All right, so my welder's pretty much dialed in. I'm happy with the way the welds look. I find the light helps me a lot, but what we're after is this. We want good penetration. You can see the heat affected zone on the outside of the weld. That one's a little bit too much stand up, but that one right there, that's how I want my plug welds to look. That was the last one I did, and I found the recipe. So I'm not gonna weld, but basically what I wanted, you can see the wire coming out, and actually, it's not a welding lesson, but it's just some tips. Most of your pliers have a cutter that gives you the exact perfect 1/4 inch stick out on your welding wire. So I'm just going to trace around without pulling the trigger. Basically how I do a plug weld is to start in the middle and I work myself out to the outside and I work my way around the entire perimeter of the weld. It's a heavier gauge metal underneath than it is on the top, and starting in the middle helps the welder acclimate and helps get a weld pool that joins the two together easily without a risk of blowing through. So that's pretty much it. Times, I'm gonna say, there's about 75 or 80 welds. So settle in, get comfortable, or find a buddy that's good at welding. So I've finished all the welds and I've gone around and treated with my metal conditioner and a scuffing pad so I don't risk any flash rusting. Now I am going to come back in and flatten out some of the stand-up on the welds just to give a better appearance, make it look a little bit better. But from this point I know the floor is in and secure. Let's look at the bottom side. Around the bottom, we've got a good mating surface. We've closed in all these gaps. The gaps along here look good. The bracing looks like it came that way from the factory. And the floor looks like the natural floor. Now, when we do the seam sealer, I will do top and bottom seams. That way we don't have any exposed gaps. That can be a moisture opportunity to create rust down the road. I hope this video helps you out when you're tackling your own floor problems, no matter what vehicle platform you're working on. As always, check us out at autometaldirect.com for the parts, pieces, and products that you're going to need for your restoration. Thanks for watching AMD Garage.